hello, everybody. If you're looking for keys to secure code, reducing risk for software teams, you are in the right place. That is what we're going to be talking about here today, all about how software teams can write more secure code, how to avoid common vulnerabilities. And when I talk about OWASP Top 10, we'll be getting into more detail in just a moment. But that's what that is all about. For those that are less familiar, is how do you, identifying the most common vulnerabilities so that you can avoid those and make your software more secure. So first and foremost, I want to introduce myself quickly. So my name is Jacob Smith. I am here with my right hand, Ryan Robinson. Wherever you are on the screen, Ryan, would you wave to the people? Maybe say hi.
Hey, everyone.
And we are here representing an awesome project called Collide, which is essentially a hub for technology professionals, bringing together the tech side of business with the business side of tech businesses to break down barriers and to explore innovative solutions. So we cover a wide range of topics. Cybersecurity and writing secure code is kind of fundamental to everything. So we see this topic as being kind of a very wide-ranging, having wide-ranging applicability. And we're very excited to have some folks with us today who are experts in this area and can tell us more. So with that, I want to go ahead and hand it off to one such expert, Mr. Aladdin Elston, who is head of information security at Altimetrik, which is our parent company, which basically helps companies level up their digital strategy and take things to the next level. So I was hoping that Aladdin, you could kind of kick things off telling us a bit more about what Altimetrik's information and cybersecurity practice looks like, just to set that context, and then kick off today's conversation, handing it off to Matt. So with that, take it away, Aladdin.
Well, no problem. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for the introduction there. Great to see that we have so many people from around the world, here in the US and also outside. There's some really amazing places, Mexico, Toronto, just to name a few, fantastic places around the world. It's great to see you people, like everyone joining us today. To talk a little bit and introduce myself. My name is Aladdin Elston. I'm head of information security here at Altimetrik. Over the next 10 minutes, I just want to talk through, what Altimetrik does as a practice and what my team do. Later on in the conversation, I'll introduce you to one of my teammates, Matt. And Matt will be taking the session, taking over the session today and talking through some of those OWASP top 10 issues. So just give me 1 second while I share my screen. Let me know when you can see that. I'm going to expand that out. Is that good? Just a little thumbs up if you can. Good to go. Okay, so the Altimetrik information security practice. Essentially what we do is we focus on that security deficit, right? So, our team are specialists and, experienced in building out security programs, essentially security program management. What we like to do is meet you, at your, on your terms, meet you where you are in your security program. You may be already in the cloud. You may be a cloud, a cloud company, or you may be somewhere in between, maybe hybrid, data center, or you may be a more traditional, small, medium business that has the old traditional, network environment. The expertise that our organization bring, generations of experience. We come from a wide variety of different backgrounds. My background has been built around the world, in fintech services, in England and now in the Bay Area. But Altimetrik specifically, we focus on DevSecOps optimization. We meet you where you are in that security journey at the beginning, right? And get a little, get to know you. Like, where is your security practice? Do you have SSDLC? Do you have DevSecOps? Are you thinking about shifting security left? And how can we meet you on that journey? And how can we partner up with you and educate and share that experience and move you to a more secure environment. And how we do that is through all these different smaller programs. You'll notice there's a security program management. So, we can oversee your entire program. And then, there's these smaller chunks when we look at a security program, starting off with things like your vendor, how to, you have plenty of us have third-party vendors that we deal with. So, we engage with a third party and we perform assessments to understand the level of risk, how much data you're sharing with customers, or how much of your customers' data or your own data you're sharing with a vendor, and then how are they securing that data, right? And are they adhering to secure best practices and protecting things. And then we, as we kind of trickle through the environment, we start to look at things like incident response and operational security. So, people on the front end, receiving those critical logs and those critical bits of information from firewalls and maybe endpoints that are notifying us that we have maybe malware or ransomware on APT or a phishing alert. We have teams that are able to immediately respond to some of those incidents. And then there's a cloud security function that we build out large environments, right? And we're also able to partner with secure cloud security teams, building out large environments, performing assessments on those environments. So, there's a lot of functionality and flexibility there. We've got vendor security management twice. I think this slide needs to be updated. There's the data privacy and security, right? That's becoming a very big topic right now. You'll notice with COVID and everyone moving to like offsite, right? And that spread of the environment, right? Everyone's working from home, and now we have data that's in a variety of different places, right? Not only is it in the data centers, or not only is it in the cloud, but now some of that data is also ending up on home users' desktops. And how do you protect that, right? Eventually, data is growing at an unbelievable rate. And the more, the faster technology gets, the more output we have. Gone are the days when we were just producing text files. Now we have video, very complex data, streaming data, gaming data. There's just unbelievable amounts of data. Mobile phones, mobile apps. Combined with fintech and healthcare, there's just this wide range of data, and obviously the more people that come online around the world, we're producing even more data. So there's an exponential growth in that data, and the question is how do we protect that data, right? It's globally distributed. How do we protect it, and how do we ensure that it's secure according to those local regions' requirements, right? So we think of things like GDPR, we think of like PCI compliance, we think about all these different, areas, HIPAA compliance, SOX 1, SOX 2, all this type of stuff. You want to make sure that if you're buying something from, maybe Poland, or if you're buying something from India, or you're buying something from Australia, is my credit card being protected? Is my username and my password and my personal identity, is that being protected in Australia? Right? Or if I buy something from, Mexico or Toronto, what is happening with my data? And we want to make sure that our customers and clients are, with all of that IP and all of that personal identifiable information, we want to make sure that that data is protected. And as Altimetrik, one of the services we provide is we come in and we perform an analysis. We get to know your organization, understand the data types, where those things are located, and set about in an exercise, locating the data, tagging that data, structuring that data, sorting it, and then, creating an environment to monitor and manage all of that. So very important stuff. And then, we speak about, how all of that connects together. DevSecOps is this growing space, this growing transformational space that's happening. Business is being digitized. And one very important thing, in my space is to bring security into the DevOps world. With all this move to the cloud, it's very important, the CI/CD pipeline is becoming quicker and faster. We're moving to production much quicker. And in many ways, we want to operationalize security into those, the CI/CD pipeline, right? And in my world, we call it the 7 touch points of security. And we like to touch the whole design process, design to production. We want to make sure that security is involved in all of those pieces. And in some instances, we may perform a manual engagement, and in others, it's a more automated, right? We rely on automation to get that job done. And then some of the new services that we're coming out with right now, we have mobile application, web and infrastructure penetration testing, More recently, we just released a OWASP Top 10 training, which is very exciting. Matt's on the call today, and he's going to take us through, a 1 hour version of what we do over a week, right? So there's significantly more time and investment spent in this space. We really dive deep into each one of the topics. And obviously, if you and your company are interested in attending this training, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll get you on your developers schedule for some time to take the whole training. Very comprehensive, a lot of great value in this training. So I hope you enjoy a little kind of snippet of what that experience is like. And then obviously off the back of that penetration testing, we provide that as a service, right? Essentially what we do is we integrate with your security department, and you're able to perform ad hoc penetration testings whenever you release something, or whenever you're about to release something. We're able to pop in, perform a penetration test, and the best part about that is you're able to schedule those things on a weekly basis, or even on an ad hoc, or once a quarter, once a month. And also, obviously, your annual pen test. You're able to schedule that, and the great thing is you have this engineer that's available to you, for report readouts and for communication about what vulnerabilities are and how they work, and really how to improve your security. And over time, the best part about this conversation is we're collecting information about your company, right? We're collecting, this kind of a landscape, right, of what the security practice looks like, and over time we're able to feed that information, with remediation advice on how to protect your company going forward. So yeah, there's that pen testing as a service. We like to get involved early on with threat modeling and risk analysis, and we talk, in the old, a few years ago we spoke about shift left security. Well, that's evolved significantly, right? And now we talk about shifting everywhere. Because security really needs to be everywhere, on every device, on every endpoint, on every Git, whether it be in the cloud, whether it be in the data center, we pretty much have to be everywhere. And I think a key component or key collaboration effort there is it needs to be agile, right? You need to allow teams and support teams to sprint and to act. And to take care of things, simultaneously, right? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and I think if you support teams to produce, or to secure the environments at their own pace, you get a much, a greater turnaround in that security kind of conversation. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a little highlight, a little overview of what everything looks like and what it looks like to team up with Altimetrik. My contact information is at the bottom there, Aladdin Elston at altimetrik.com, or you can feel free to give me a call. Likewise, I'm on the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. I'm also on LinkedIn, Aladdin Elston. If you're connected to Jacob, you'll probably find me that way too. Type my name in, get connected. If you have any questions, I'm always available. Jacob will let most of you know we're hiring. Like all organizations are, but if you're excited to come and learn, how to perform, penetration tests and to learn more about the SSDLC and how we roll out, that touchpoint security, come and join my team. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, so that, just to kind of give you a little snapshot, that's a little bit about me. Thank you, Jacob, for giving me this time. And I guess at this point, I want to hand back over to you and to Matt. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I'll just chime in quickly and say I dropped it in the chat. I'll include your email as well, but Aladdin's info, the LinkedIn info. Also, the note here is just this is an interactive session. So as Matt dives into the conversation, if you have any questions about what Aladdin just said, please feel free to drop any insights. We know we have a lot of smart folks in the room that have varying degrees of expertise in this area. So don't hesitate to drop an insight if you think it adds value. A question if you're unclear on something, etc. And we'll keep this conversation going in our Slack channel, which is effectively a forum for this type of ongoing conversation. So the information's in the chat as well. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Matt in just a second. I think he's just getting his presentation up.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making it to this training. So my name is Matt, Matthew Manalac. I will be your guide today. So normally this type of training, we space it out to 5 days, but somehow I'm going to try to magically compress this into 1 hour and hopefully get some good knowledge in on how to secure applications. So just a little background about myself. I'm a DevSecOps engineer here at Altimetrik. I've been working in software development for the last 7 or 8 years. And in my previous life, I was a product manager for a software company. And, I did a lot of bug testing, QA testing. And the funny thing is, I actually started my journey in web security back in 2015. So, a little something about myself. I was actually doing a research paper on cybercrime, and what ended up happening was I researched like all the tools that the bad guys would use, and what ended up happening was I ended up learning some of the techniques, but I was using it as as a way to secure my own applications during that time. And so it was really really funny thing that happened early on in my journey. One of the first things that I learned was how to use Google queries to look for things. And, I was actually able to find security vulnerabilities back in 2015, like credentials and directories and files not meant for the public. So it was pretty crazy. But, the Google search engine, people think that it's just, this thing that looks up information online, but it's actually one of the to this day, I'm still using it. It's one of the best, penetration testing tools ever. So, back then you would be able to access like IoT devices, like cameras, databases, even cloud storage, which was really crazy. But, I got good at that, and I decided that maybe I'll get more serious with this. And, I've just been training up, and, I'm glad to be working here at Altimetrik, using my years of experience to help people secure their applications more. So with that out of the way, so welcome everyone to the OWASP Top 10 Security Training. So we'll just go over the agenda here really quick. So I'm going to introduce several things today. So first, security testing tools. We're going to use Burp Suite. So this is one of the main tools that I'll be showing you on this presentation today. We'll also be using OWASP Juice Shop. So this is a purposely vulnerable application that is used to train security professionals. One of the ways that I trained in the past was through maybe some of you who have experience doing web security, you're probably already familiar with this, but CTFs, or capture the flags. So essentially these are virtual machines or purposely vulnerable applications to simulate real world applications to teach you how to use your tools. And also we'll go over the OWASP Top 10 and go through what they are, as well as do a really quick demo. I'll probably do one of each if I can during this time, and a remediation towards the end. And we'll drop some information and links in the chat. And if one of my coworkers and colleagues could do so, I think what would be really helpful is if you could drop the OWASP data sheet that we give to our on our training. So that would be really helpful, because this is going to be 1 hour. I'm going to try to compress everything during this time. So I want people. I think it's going to be easier if we just give you the information and save you time scrolling down notes. And yeah, so with that out of the way, let me move on to the next slide. And what is OWASP? So OWASP stands for Open Web Application Security Project. So it's an independent nonprofit foundation providing awareness for improved security practices, and they offer guidance and resources in enhancing software and web application security. Some of the projects that we're currently working on, we're coming up with a web security testing guide. In fact, that's going to be geared more towards penetration testers, juniors coming into the company, or anyone who wants to set up a security team in their company. We're also doing a mobile security testing training as well. And one thing that we didn't include in this slide is network security. So I'm currently working with a few of my colleagues to set up training on how to test your internal networks. And I think sometimes that is often overlooked. And, people think that, oh, I have, it's just an internal network, we're not going to like put things in place to, kind of like secure that much, like, because who can get in, just, it's all internal. But, there's actually different ways, for people to get into an internal network, since almost everything is connected to the internet. And yeah, so I might cite some examples on that, but we are working on training for that as well. And so what's the goal of OWASP? So it aims to educate developers, architects, security teams about potential impact of application security weaknesses. And like I said, we're going to go over all of these issues during this session. So let me just walk you through what they are. So going from the top, the OWASP top 10 for the year for 2021 consists of broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design, security misconfiguration, vulnerable and outdated components, identification and authentication failures, software and data integrity failures, security logging and monitoring failures, and server-side request forgery. So we're going to go through all of that today. Hopefully, I can get at least a demo out for each one, which is very cool. And yeah, so just to briefly go over the instruments or the application that we're going to be testing, it's going to be OWASP Juice Shop. If one of my coworkers could also drop a link for that in the chat, that would be great, just for your own personal, for your own references in the future. So this is OWASP Juice Shop. It's an intentionally vulnerable web application designed for security flaws and vulnerabilities found in the OWASP top 10. So the way it's been set up is it's learning through it's gamified learning, with tools used to find vulnerabilities in real world applications. So much like CTFs or capture the flags. And let me just pull that up, what it looks like really quick. So this is an example of what Juice Shop looks like. And in fact, if we go through it here, it's pretty similar to an application that you would find online. And if you go through it, it's like an e-commerce site. So you can choose to add products onto your cart if you're logged in as a person. So let me just log in as good old Jim. And I'm going to let myself in. And as you can see, so I kind of glossed over this, but I actually used a SQL injection attack to log myself in without a password, which I'm going to explain a little bit. But yeah, just for the session here, so I just wanted to go through what it looks like as a logged in user. So you can chat. There's a chat function where you can communicate with someone, much like a modern application that has a customer service built in. You can leave a message and send a file, and this is going to play in a little bit once we go through some of the demos. And obviously you can also add items into your basket to purchase. So it functions and looks much like a web application online. And yep, so that's what we're going to be using for the training today. So the main tool that we're going to use is called Burp Suite. So Burp, it's a fully featured web application toolkit for security engineers. So the way I look at it, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of sorts, where you could pretty much do 95% of your web security testing with Burp Suite. So it's packed with a lot of features. One of the main features that it has is the ability to intercept and resend HTTP requests, allowing users to craft different payloads to test for vulnerabilities. And Burp Suite, it comes with an automated scanner and a suite of plugins, which is great. It it can actually automate certain things for you. And with that being said, I'm actually going to run that in the background while we're doing this session. So as you can see, I have Burp Suite pulled up on here, and every time I go through the application, it actually logs my history there. So, which means that it will also allow me to replay some of the data. And, just so I can have this in the background, because the scanner takes a while here, I'm just going to run a scan. So I'm going to enter the URL for that. And, we'll see what it comes up with in a little bit. So just want to throw that in there. So I'm just going to hit OK and just let it run. So while we have that, I'm going to go through the OWASP top 10. So the first OWASP top 10 vulnerability is broken access control. So what this does is, access controls, they enforce permissions and policies to ensure authorized access to data, giving organizations the ability to monitor and protect resources. Access permissions should be restricted to verified users to preserve data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But failures typically lead to unauthorized information disclosure, modification, or destruction of all data, or performing a business function outside the user's limits. So some of these examples are, let me just go through that here. So with broken access control, some of the issues, just an example of this was forced browsing. So what that is when a user can access a file or a folder online despite not having authorization for it. So one example of this, a real world example, which was one of my first bugs that I found in the wild, was with the use of Google queries, like I mentioned earlier. Just to explain, the way Google works is it's actually a very great hacking tool, not just for research, but its ability to crawl websites. So when you have an application that you launch or make available on the internet, Google will index it. So what will happen is if your application isn't properly configured, that will leave you, you can actually leave certain folders and files exposed on the internet. And what I was able to find, this was like a crazy story back then. Back in 2016, I had actually found it was actually a list of user information from a certain website. And I had used the Google queries to look for a specific file. And it was a PDF file, but upon downloading it, the file was password protected. So what's crazy was that I went back into Google and typed in a specific query, and I actually found another file that actually had the password to open that PDF, and I was actually able to open it. And it just goes to show that sometimes you might think that attackers will use all these crazy tools, like some of them I'll be showing to you in a little bit, to compromise the system. But oftentimes it's there's a low-tech approach, like they can use the Google Google search queries to do that, or a simple enumeration technique. So one of the apps that I recently pen tested, it actually had a deprecated API. So what happened was I noticed that there was an API endpoint that was giving some information about where certain users were from. It was like location data, but what happened was just reading the source code, I found a deprecated API that allowed me to use the admin functions to basically dump out all of the information for all of the users and employees of this certain application. So, you know, it was crazy. I didn't do anything fancy. I pretty much just use Burp Suite. So, yeah, so that's kind of an example of broken access control. And just really quick, going back to Burp Suite now, let's see what it's found. So as you can see, running the scanner, it was able to tell me certain issues with the application, like a vulnerable Java jQuery library. If this was a more, you know, if this was a real world application, probably find even more. But you know, this just shows you some of the functions that it has. But if we navigate to the sitemap, we can see that there's a specific folder on the system that seems to be available. And oh, it's an FTP folder. So let's go check it out. So if I go to JuShop here and navigate to that FTP folder, it seems that we have access to specific certain backup files that aren't even meant to be available to regular users. So another real world example of this would be something that I call something called a Git information leak. So what that is sometimes applications, what will happen is the Git folder will be exposed online, and an attacker can download it. And what will happen is they'll be able to see all of the commits from that Git folder. And oftentimes from these commits, software developers, they'll include API tokens, passwords, credentials, API keys, just so much information. And I really wish that this would have been a longer session, because one of the tools that I primarily use is called TruffleHog. Maybe some of you who have already experienced in web security already know this. And what it is it's this tool that allows you to scour GitHub repositories for API keys. And, you know, so I recommend, you know, anyone on this call, you know, I know Aladdin's talked a lot about, you know, the pen testing as a service that we offer, you know, but we also offer training in web penetration testing, network and mobile security training as well. So if you're interested in learning to, you know, not just secure your application by using, you know, the same tools that we use, but if you want to, you know, set up a team, then, you know, we're here and we're more than glad to do that. But anyways, moving forward. So so that is an example of broken access control. So it often leads to information disclosure and other issues. So so going to the remediation. So these are our recommendations. So deny by default, except for publicly accessible resources. Model access controls should enforce record ownership rather than accepting the user can create, read, update, or delete any records. Disable web server directory listing and ensure file metadata. Example, Git and backup files are not present within the web roots. So that's a huge deal, often overlooked, in my opinion. In fact, this is one of the vulnerabilities that I find all the time. Log access control failures, so alert admins when appropriate. Rate limit API and controller access to minimize the harm from automated attack tooling, and stateful session identifiers should be invalidated on the server after logout. Okay, so moving on. So the next vulnerability on the OWASP top 10 is cryptographic failure. So sensitive data must be encrypted with strong cryptographic algorithms. the protection needs for confidential information and sensitive data require extra security, especially if they fall under privacy law, such as the EU's GDPR regulation or regulations, and financial data protection, such as PCI data security standards. And yeah, so data at rest or in transit can lead to sensitive data exposure without proper encryption methods and deprecated cryptographic padding methods. So example of some sensitive data, I'm sure you're aware of this already, credit card numbers, social security numbers, health records, especially during these times, intellectual property, personally identifiable information, and login credentials. So some of the key issues regarding that are transmitting sensitive information in clear text without appropriate cryptographic hash functions, encryption not implemented properly or using old or weak algorithms, using default crypto keys or weak crypto keys without proper key management or rotation. I think that's important as well. I believe from some researchers, I'll try to look for the link later, but I think they did a study on AWS API keys, or secret keys and access keys. It turns out that they were finding some developers were actually not rotating keys for 10 years, which was crazy. But I'll look for that link and I'll drop it in the chat later once I find it. Passwords such as cryptographic keys without a password-based key derivation function, hard-coded data like tokens, secret keys, passwords in the source code. This is something that I found as well every now and then, and especially with GitHub repositories, and also logging sensitive data in server logs without server certificate validation. So these are some key issues of that. And one of the examples, in fact, I'll skip to the demo on this right now, is that an attacker, they can actually access a database, and they can easily decrypt or guess credentials using a word list of leaked passwords. So we're gonna go. I'm gonna just show you this method just to kind of show that example in real time, and I'll also show you some tools that you can use to test for that. So demo time. So here we go, and if we go to the Juice Shop application, we'll notice that there is a search feature. So I'm going to pull this up on the other side of the screen just to show you live what's happening. But if I go to proxy here and go to history, in fact, I think this would be a good time to show one of the main features of Burp, where you can actually intercept a HTTP request. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that on, and you'll notice that when I send in a request, it will actually not move forward. It will actually wait for me to, it'll actually capture that request and delay it and allow me to look at the information from the HTTP request. And if I decide to, I'm just going to move this forward here. I can actually send this to the repeater. So what I'll do is I'll probably send this over again. Let me just turn that off. So if I look for a specific item here, I'll just forward that. And give me one sec. So if we'll, let's say, log in, let me just do this one really quick here. So if I were to log in as someone, let me just show you this basic function here. you'll notice that if I were to type in credentials here, it would prevent me from moving forward and actually capture the payload. So as you can see on the left here, we can actually send this information over to the repeater, and I'm free to craft whatever payload I want in order to gain access to this account. So I can change it to anything I want, and it'll just send that over. And this won't be the correct password. I will show you a way that a person would be able to bypass that. But moving back, let me get back to the example really quick of cryptographic failures. So let me log in here really quick. So let me log in as Jim. So as you noticed here, if I type in Apple, we'll go to HTTP history, and we can actually see the specific request where that was made. So it's this one for the search query. And I'm going to send this to the repeater like I'd shown earlier. And we're going to attempt to manipulate this request. So I'm going to type in Apple and just hit send. If we'll notice on the response, it shows accurately what items are in this person's cart. So, that's being displayed on the search queries. And as you notice that it seems that we can infer that it's communicating to a database. And the way to determine that is using a SQL injection attack or causing an error on the application. So what I'm going to do is, in order to determine what type of database it's using, I'm going to try to force an error. And if I send in this specific request, we'll notice that it's going to give an error here. So, it's giving us a way to do path traversal or finding specific files on the server. But what I was actually going to show you is causing an error from the search query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this. And if we noticed here, we get a SQLite error. So what I did was I injected a SQL query to first end the previous query using a single quote and to comment out the rest of the query. And what's going to happen is since I'm doing that, it's going to cause an error, and we can determine that there is a SQLite database being used. So with that information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to craft a request to get all of the user data from the database. So what I'm going to do is I've already created that payload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paste that in, and you'll notice that when I use this payload first and I send it, we'll get another error actually. So it'll say bad request. So what's happening is in order for this request to be successful, I have to URL encode this SQL query. So the good thing about Burp Suite is that it has all these built-in functions to make things easier for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this query and go to convert selection URL, and I'm going to URL encode key characters. And if you noticed here, it'll make the query URL friendly. And once I send this in, and as you noticed here, we get a dump of the a data dump of the user information from the database. So as you can see, we have the name of the users, their ID, and the one thing, if we noticed here, is that the under description, this is actually the hashed password. So what's happening is like I mentioned earlier, when I explained when we were covering cryptographic failures, sometimes the data that is stored on the database isn't hashed. There's no salt to actually prevent people from decrypting the hashed password. So I'm actually going to show you this on the next screen here. Let me just pull up this very easy tool, and I'm going to use CrackStation to essentially crack this hash. So if I hit that, we're actually going to get the user's password almost immediately. So what I'll do now is just to test this, we'll go back to the application and attempt to log in as the admin. So just check. I'm going to log in as the administrator using that password, and we'll admin 123, log in, and success. So that's what I like about Juju Shop. It's a gamified learning, so it'll show you when you solve the challenge. So as we can see, we've logged in as the admin. So going back now to cryptographic failures. So remediation, make sure to use SSL TLS 1.3 for all connections that are authenticated or transmitting sensitive information. Don't store sensitive data unnecessarily. Data that is not retained cannot be stolen. Make sure to encrypt all sensitive data in transit and at rest with secure protocols. And most importantly, ensure passwords are stored with an algorithm specifically designed for password protection. So such as the salted hash, like I explained earlier. So this is going to be in the data sheet that we're going to provide, and I'll just move forward in the interest of time. So the next vulnerability on the list is injection. So injection attacks, they involve supplying an application with data that is not validated, filtered, or sanitized. And this type of query, it allows an attacker to view, extract, or modify sensitive information on a server. And so search parameters can be injected with hostile data to extract sensitive records. So I just shown that earlier. So that's an example of that. Dynamic queries or non-parameterized calls with concatenated hostile data are contained within the command structure and can be used without context-sensitive encoding. So this is probably one of my favorite vulnerabilities to find. In fact, it's probably, you can actually find this injection points for this in 90% of applications. So the three most common injection attacks are code injection. So that's cross-site scripting or XSS, command injection, and SQL injection. So I had shown an example of a SQL injection attack earlier, but I'll get more in depth into the other two. So on the next slide here, so a code injection, it's when an attacker injects code into the application, and it's different from a command injection. So this mostly affects information from the application level. In contrast to that, during a command injection, the attacker actually injects operating system commands with the privileges of the user running the application. And what that'll allow them to do is they can actually execute commands directly on the server. So an example of this really quick is one of the applications that I had tested in the past was a PHP server, and there was an upload functionality within that application that allowed you to upload a profile picture. And I found out that it wasn't doing proper checks to see if a file was actually an image file or if it was something else. So I had actually masked the signature of a PHP file as an image, and I was able to bypass that, and navigating to the location of where my quote unquote profile picture would be, I was actually able to trigger the malicious file to cause it to connect to my computer and then take over the server. So that's an example of how a command injection will work in contrast to code injection, which I'm going to demonstrate in a little bit. Yeah, so, and SQL injection, this just allows an attacker to inject SQL statements that can read or modify database data, such as the one that I had shown earlier. And yeah, so moving forward, this is just an example of vulnerable and fixed code. So for those of you who are React developers, this is it's good to make sure that there's proper sanitization in place, wherein when someone inputs data into a field, it doesn't the application doesn't interpret it as code. So what'll happen sometimes is, for example, if it's a forum page where you could post content on there, an attacker could actually post JavaScript code where the application would interpret it as something, where the application would interpret that code and execute it within the application. You want to make sure that it sanitizes it and just take it literally and just print out the code rather than execute it. So this is just an example on here. So we'll make sure to provide this information towards the end of the session and moving forward. So just an example of this, and just log in to okay. So just as an example here, what will happen is if you noticed, whenever we type a query on the search field here, it'll actually print out text. So what I'll do to test this is see if I can manipulate the HTML code on the application. So, okay. It doesn't seem to do that, but what we'll do is we'll run some other payloads really quick to test that. So maybe a JavaScript code would work. So one of the classics is getting it to alert, to do an alert box. And if we send that in, okay, there is some proper sanitization going. So as an attacker, they would determine that maybe it's sanitizing for the script tag. And what we'll do is we'll find a different way to do that. So perhaps we'll inject the JavaScript code a different way as an iframe. So, okay, that was able to trigger. So just as an example, this is the code that I had actually entered into the search query, and it was able to cause this specific error. So now that we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to print out this person's session cookies. So the next payload that I'm going to use is this payload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cause an alert to pop up on the screen that'll display the person's session cookie. So I'm going to insert that here and hit enter. And as you can see, it actually prints that out. And I think it's going to be better if I log in. Give me one sec here as an administrator to better emphasize that. So we'll run that payload again. And as you can see, we have this person's JWT token. So you're probably wondering, like, well, how would this actually work in a real life scenario? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really quick code that I had actually written earlier, just to demonstrate that. So this is a cookie stealer script on a PHP server. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this server here, and what we'll do is we'll serve out this code. And as you can see, what's going to happen now is I'll actually try to get we'll actually try to get this user's session cookies. So what we'll do is we'll kind of go off of the earlier payload, and this is what I'm going to be putting into the search field. So I'm going to be redirecting the person's traffic to my server. And as you can see, this is going to be the payload I'll be using. And if I enter that in here, and hopefully it will We'll see this in real time here. I'll hit enter and boom. So if you notice, the difference here is that it was more subtle. There wasn't an alert pop up telling me that your session's been stolen. It was just like an error. And we could make it even more covert by hiding it as a pixel. But as you can see, we indeed have the person's JWT token. And if we actually decrypt this token here, we'll go to jwt.io and paste this in. As you can see, we actually got the person's username, their hash password, their role, and other information as well. So that's just an example. And if just to emphasize this even further, there's actually a log file on here, and this is actually displaying all of the captured credentials from all of the users that were navigating to this page. So yeah, so that's an example of how this type of vulnerability and can be exploited within an application. So remediation. So like I said earlier, use parameterized queries and prepared statements to prevent the database from interpreting the contents of bind variables as part of the query, or just make sure that when your application interprets input from the user, that it doesn't get executed as code on your server or on your application. Validate user privileges, allowed commands, and accessibility of the database system. Also, input validation and server-side checks, and using positive server-side input validation as well. So, like I said earlier, I recommend checking the datasheet that we provided. I know this is going to be a little bit of a quicker session than normal, but yeah, so but mainly, yeah, these are the recommendations that we have. Just make sure that there's proper filtering of user input on the application. The next vulnerability that we'll go over is insecure design. So what is that? So insecure design flaws, they're weaknesses related to application architecture and design flaws. So these weaknesses occur due to missing or ineffective security control. So architectural flaws in the development process are preventable with business risk profiling, as it is crucial to determine the level of security design before developing an application. So just to sum that up, one of the things that we recommend is security as design. So having a team that actively works to work with your developers, doing threat modeling to find out during, before, and even during development of the application, to look for potential attack vectors, or making sure that there's proper mechanisms in place that will prevent unauthorized access or vulnerable, making sure that there's no potential risks and bugs that could cause some kind of exploit or vulnerability on the application. So, that's what we recommend pretty much for that. So insecure design, it's actually quite broad. It actually covers a lot of CVEs. And if you go to the actual OWASP top 10 site, it'll actually list that for you. So if one of my colleagues could post that in the chat as well. So examples of this are credential recovery workflow, including questions and answers. So if you have something in place where you are allowing people to reset their passwords by having security questions in place, I mean, the main issue with that is that more than one person can know the answer to that. So if they're able to guess this person's security question answers by going to their social media sites or doing research on them online, they can easily bypass this mechanism. Also, unrestricted file uploads. That's something I mentioned earlier, wherein an attacker can actually upload file types that aren't meant to be uploaded. So sometimes they'll be able to upload specific files that have malicious code that can manipulate the backend server-side code, so things like that, business logic errors, and a website with no protection against bots, so no anti-automation. So an example of this is, if you remember when the PS5 launched, there were bots that were scanning websites and buying up the supply, and these e-commerce websites, they just didn't have any protections against bots, and a lot of scalping was occurring on auction sites. So that's an example of that. And here's an example of vulnerable code. So as you can see on the left, I believe, let's see here. So there's only one security check to see if this file is already in the system. But if you go on the right side here, we can see that there's other things in place like file size and even the file type. So just make sure that when you write your code that you have checks in place. One thing I failed to mention on here is antivirus checks as well, but that's also another important thing to have as well. So being able to make sure that the file that's uploaded isn't malicious and can be executed on the backend. Okay, so just a really quick example of this, and we'll just pull up Burp Suite here again, and I'll just log out. And if we noticed, we'll try to log in as good old Morty. And okay, we don't know his password, so we'll go to forget password. So juice-shop, let's see, Morty at juice-shop. And security question, name of your favorite pet. Santa's little helper. Okay. And we'll just set that to password and change it. But, wrong answer to the security question. So going back to Burp Suite, if we go to the HTTP history here, we'll notice that there was a specific request on reset password that had that information. So like what we did earlier, we're going to send it to repeater. And what we'll do is we'll just send it and see what the response is. And if we notice on the response here, there's a specific, there's a specific string of text that came along with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and this will play a role in just a few moments. So let's see here. So we don't know who or what the answer is to the security question. And what an attacker could do is, not just go online to research this person's pet, but they could also go through a word list of names of actual pets to guess the security questions. What I'm going to do is we'll send this to the intruder tool, and this will allow us to brute force the answer to that. So I'm going to just clear all this out. And as we can see, this is where we'd want to insert the payload. So we're going to add that. And if we go to payload here, we have the option to pass in a word list. So I'm going to do that right now. And let's see here. So let me go through our payloads, and give me one sec. And as you can see here, I prepared this word list for this occasion, and it'll be entered here once I hit open, and we'll have 39 attempts at a password or at the answer for a security question. And if we noticed earlier, there was that text that appeared when we sent the wrong password. So what we're going to do is go to grep match. So what this is going to do is it's going to create an extra column that has, I'm going to clear this out first. it'll actually create a column that'll allow us to search or filter out for that specific string. So I'm going to paste that in here. And I'm going to hit add, and it'll automatically flag the result with responses matching these expressions. So going back, I think I am ready now to see if any of these pets are Morty's, and if I hit start attack, we'll actually get the information here. So, oh, here we go. And there's already data coming in. And if we noticed, I'm just gonna pause this. Oh, okay, just gonna carry that out. I'll just pause it now. If we noticed, we can filter out with the status, but most importantly, it'll also filter the specific string that I had placed into the payload option. So it seems that all of these that were incorrect had the string. However, the 200 status response did not have that. So if we scroll down and look at the response, we were able to successfully change Morty's password. So what we're going to do is, since we changed it to password, we're going to log in as him and just verify that. So I'm going to close this down. And if we go back to Burp Suite here, sorry, Juice Shop, as you can see, we got a notification that we solved that challenge. And if we try to log in as Morty, let's see here, with the new password and log in, we are successful. So that is an example of an insecure insecure design feature on the application. So remediation for that. So perform architecture risk analysis and threat modeling to help evaluate risk and implement compensating controls. Make sure that you implement a secure software development lifecycle, or SDLC, with regular code reviews. And like Aladdin was saying earlier, adopt a shift left mentality to adhere to security design principles. So, the most important thing is being able to kind of mitigate these issues even before launch by reviewing your code and making sure that there's no vulnerabilities upon launch. So yeah, so moving forward, we're going to go to number 5, which is security misconfiguration. So what is that? So security misconfigurations, they occur when security settings are not implemented or defined accordingly to industry security standards. So security frameworks of an application, website, or server should be maintained by system administrators to reduce risk. And manual or ad hoc configuration, insecure default configurations, error messages containing sensitive information are all examples of that. So examples, even more, default accounts with unchanged passwords, poorly configured permissions, default enabled features like the admin interface. I mentioned earlier there was a deprecated admin API endpoint that we were able to use to display user information, unprotected files and directories, missing course policy or security headers, and error messages with stack traces. So I think majority of what we've shown you so far are examples of that. Primarily, one of the things that we try to encourage with developers is to make sure that error messages are not detailed whenever they occur, because that is one of the ways that an attacker can actually figure out how the system works on the back end. So making sure that information such as the one earlier, we'll just do it again here. If we go to that specific page, I was able to cause an error that showed hold on one sec. that showed the path to this server's, it actually showed a path to the server. And the way an attacker could take advantage of this is based on this information, they could actually find where certain files are in a server's drive. So that's an example of that. And give me 1 sec. I'm actually getting an error from Burp Suite. I have to turn off the scanner. It's actually going off. So let me just turn that off. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so moving forward, I had shown that error earlier, and that's just an example again. And let's see. So we're going to do a quick demo of this. Let's see here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is based on the error that I had gotten from the application, we could tell that this server is running on a Windows. It's actually running on a Windows server. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to read one of the files, and what we'll do is we'll pull up the application again. And if we noticed, there was a certain feature on here that allowed us to upload a file. So going back to that, let's see here. So test, give me 1 moment. Okay, so if we noticed here, it'll actually give us a, it'll actually tell us that we can upload a PDF or a zip file. But okay, what if we try to upload an image? So let me do that really quick. So if we noticed here, there's an image file, and if I upload that, it'll give me this error. So forbidden file type. Okay, that's interesting. So one of the things that we'll do here is open the, look at the source code and look up some information on that. So we'll do a quick check. And if we look for that, oh, here we go. So if we look here, I'm going to maximize this. It seems that there was a deprecated function here. So input area for uploading single invoice PDF or XML, B2B order file, or zip archive. So interesting. So XML, huh? All right. So it turns out we can upload an XML file. So what we're going to do is we're going to craft a specific payload for that, which will allow us to read the file. So what I'll do is I will open, let's see here. We'll go to the, let me show you my folder here that has the specific payload. What we'll do is we'll actually construct a, we'll actually do a file upload of XML external entity file. So what this will allow us to do is, if you can see here, we're actually going to create an XXC variable that will allow us to, print out the contents of this file. So what we're going to try to do is on this Windows server, we're going to open this system.ini file. So, okay, with that knowledge, we're going to try to upload this specific file. So I'll enter this as, let's see here. So it's going to be the Windows simple payload, XSC Windows payload. So I'm going to open that. And if we notice here, I'm going to minimize this so we can see, we'll go to network and we'll try to record this activity. So we'll upload this file and, oh, okay. So we got a notification that we solved a specific challenge and we were able to read the contents of that file. But if we go to file upload here, we'll notice, we'll check the preview. And if we see here, it actually read the contents of this file. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to open the specific file that it was looking for. So give me one moment while I do that. And let me open this. So yeah, just open that. As you can see here, these are the actual contents of the server. So of that specific file. So as you can see, it actually matches that. And this is quite important, as an attacker could actually upload a payload similar to this and read the contents of perhaps SSH keys, which will then allow them access to an SSH server if you have that in place. So that is an example of this specific attack. So let me go back to the slides. And remediation, make sure to disable unnecessary features, change default accounts, passwords, credentials. Make sure that when you have your application set in place or setting up a device to make sure to change the credentials, because it's one of the things that I've found, especially with testing internal networks, is that a lot of the logins for admins and for certain devices, they're all using default credentials that you can find online if you Google it, for the manual for that device. So, that we encourage you to do that. Also, configure a server to prevent unauthorized access, implement same origin policy, disable unused services, and make sure to keep information about stack tracing secure. So just as shown earlier, attackers will use errors to identify ways into the system, or try to find out how the backend logic works to stage an attack. So, and most importantly, disable directory listings if they are not necessary. That goes back to the very first vulnerability that we had discussed with broken access controls. Make sure that those directories aren't accessible to unauthorized persons.
Aladdin, did you have anything you wanted to chime in with?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to, open the conversation up to the floor. We're at the halfway mark. Matt's covered some really interesting stuff so far. Some of you have heard of the OWASP top 10. This is the latest list that's, being published. There's some of the old web application security risks that come through, and they've just been kind of summarized and moved around into some new spaces. Broken access controls, the classic. We find this very common. It's a very common issue that we find today, just by performing some basic checks. Cryptographic failures. Matt demonstrated a great, very easy way of finding some hash passwords and then just decrypting them. Injection attacks, my personal favorite: SQL injection, cross-site scripting, command injection. A lot of the activity that I personally like to perform in an organization is tackling those injection attacks, right? If you can educate a organization on how to defend against just injection attacks, you'll notice a significant drop-off in vulnerabilities, from the get-go, right? This is such a prevalent issue in web applications, and people really start to understand, how these attacks work and how these attacks happen. When you configure an application with security in mind, and that just kind of trickles down throughout the rest of the application, and also the thought process, right? Well, okay, so input validation, output encoding, those are two ways that we recommend, to protect against web application attacks, injection attacks, and that that happens on the web app itself, right? On the actual web application. A lot of security folk will say, oh, just put a WAF in front of that application and you'll be fine. Well, we're in the business of teaching you how to perform best practice security, and that involves a little bit more than just putting another device in front of your network, right? Because hackers are smart and they have time. And given time, they're going to bypass that web application firewall. They're going to find a way around it, and they're still going to inject your app, right? And the thing is, the web application firewall is not necessarily going to be able to stop requests that it believes are, allowed, right? A regular user could be performing a normal request, something it's supposed to perform, especially if they're authenticated, and it's just going to allow them to do it. So if your application is not protecting itself against the user, right, and defending its data, it's very likely that you're going to fall prey to this. So that, that's why we think, defense in depth is so important, making sure that your application is configured securely, and then, that goes all the way through, through the application to the middleware and onto the database. Is the database performing, SQL injection prevention? Are there parameterized queries, bind variables, ORMs, things like this in place to protect against SQL injection attacks? So, great job, Matt, illustrating, some of those attacks right there. And then we moved on to insecure design. Matt spoke about threat modeling, and that's, one of my favorite, parts of where, security in a security program. I started my journey out as a penetration tester, just like Matt. And, I started to realize that, look, we're finding vulnerabilities, as a pen tester in the web application, when the web application is live, right? When it's out, on the internet. And I was like, that's just too late, right? It's already public. And you could lose, customer data, you could lose, the company's reputation. And over a period of time, you go from break fix mentality, where you're teaching, educating on how to fix, or teaching organizations and developers on how to fix their environment. And then you start to get involved further up in the conversation, right? And you start to shift security left. You get to that point where you're talking about, web application security risks in the design phase, right? So I would look in an architecture, and I'd work very closely with the developers and the architects, the system administrators and the infrastructure team. And we talk about all the different types of attacks and implement mitigating controls early on so that those issues don't make it through to production, right? So that, the testing becomes a lot, very different. So you get your DAST and SAS stuff that happens in between, maybe some vulnerability scanning that happens, and then pen testing that happens at the end. With doing threat modeling up front, we're probably saving the organization, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because every issue that you find in production takes a significant amount of work for developers to reconfigure, recode, and re-release issues when they find them. So very important conversation there. Insecure design, another one of my favorites. Matt spoke about in the last one, security misconfiguration, another classic. You want to think about all the traditional stuff, default usernames and passwords, disabling directory listing. These are just some of the classic security measures that we need to, keep in place. So yeah, great job, Matt. Keep it up. And obviously, if there's any questions in the channel, feel free to add.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it looks like we have one from Xavier here. So the question was, do you know if frameworks like Django, which use ORMs, prevent injections by default?
We'll have to look into that. I believe so. Let me check. Hold on one sec.
And also Aladdin, you're on. If you're talking.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know personally about Django. Having ORMs built in is obviously always going to be beneficial. One thing I've noticed with ORM is, depending on how it's configured, is still vulnerable to SQL injection. So it really depends on how those, how it's being configured. But like most applications, right? Most applications come with some kind of built-in mechanism that you can configure to help defend against, these issues, whether it be on the front end, middleware, or the back end. But a lot of developers, or some developers, I'm not going to say a lot, I'm not going to say a lot, but some developers aren't aware that these functions are available. And it just takes a little bit of education to kind of, hey, let's take a look at the technical documentation for that web application, for that database, right, for the CMS, or whatever the case is, and let's enable some of this functionality, right? You enable some of that functionality and out of the box, not necessarily out of the box, but with a little bit of configuration, you get to defend your application significantly more than if you just released it with default configuration. So great question, Xavier. I'll do some more research into Django itself. Matt, if you have any more information on that, please share. If not, we'll get to, Jacob, please connect us with Xavier and we'll connect offline and get him some information there.
Matt, this is so much great information. I think what's going to be the best move here is to pause at this point and actually just bump this to a part 2. So, I think it's fantastic. Everyone stuck around. Lots of great information to process. I think that's a good move. Does that sound good for everybody? Give us a thumbs up if that sounds like a good move.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.